What's up, NBA fans? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy, JB, host of the Behind the Bench podcast networking channel. Just want to give a shout out to the rest of the crew. I'm talking about Shy, Kelvin, and Jermaine, along with new members of the crew, Kobe Bryant Film Room and Big Dog Talk Sports. And we all want to thank you, the subscribers, for your continued support, and with your willingness to help Behind the Bench podcast grow, we have achieved over 100,000 views and now have 570 plus subscribers. So we want to thank you because you're going to make this happen, and we're going to provide the best sports content possible with an objective view from a historical perspective. No narratives, no angles, no agendas, just presenting sports in the most authentic realm there is. So again, thank you for tuning in. Now, as I mentioned when I did my video yesterday about the original young core of the Los Angeles Lakers, the real young core, the real players, well, we're just touching the surface of what's been going on with the Los Angeles Lakers over the past 5 years. And not only has the future of the franchise been compromised and mortgaged away, but the very history of this storied franchise. People got to realize there's been a lot of great sports franchises over time. Now, I would say throughout the 20th century, the greatest sports franchise of all sports, including basketball, football, and baseball, has been the New York Yankees. They won like 27 world championships or World Series championships, with their last title being in 2009. Okay, so the Yankees not won the World Series and coming up on 15 years, but they're still the Yankees. They still have a mystique about them. They still have their own identity. They don't let nobody come in and take over the franchise. You know what I mean? That's off limits. It's not even a question. You know, when the late George Steinbrenner ran that team, you know what I'm saying? It's like there was a lot of controversy about him, but at the end of the day, when you look at it, man, people respected George Steinbrenner. He was not going to let nobody come in and take over. It was no ifs, ands, or buts. You knew who. Matter of fact, they called him the boss. He was the boss. Okay. You had a lot of great sports franchises in football. Green Bay Packers. I'm just talking about historically. Pittsburgh Steelers, Dallas Cowboys, San Francisco 49ers, the New England Patriots. You gotta give them that credit, and other franchises who have been very successful over time. They have their own identity. They have a rich history. See, the key to all this is history, tradition, building on that tradition. You know what I'm saying? Or when you have to start over, you create new history to add on to the history that's already been achieved. And when I look at the Los Angeles Lakers right now, as me personally, a fan of this franchise for a very long time, and I knew when they were led to take the direction that they had been pursuing since the summer of 2018, you can tell if you really look at the entire scope of what was about to go down, that the history of this story franchise. And this has been the most successful sports franchise since 1980. They won 10 championships from 1980 to 2010. So that's really an average of one championship every 3 years. Right? Okay. But to justify the efforts of what's been going on over these past 5 years, now entering year 6, the history of the franchise has been misrepresented, distorted, undermined, and ultimately disrespected. And it all culminated early this week when they presented that in-season tournament. They call it a banner. It don't even look like a banner. It look more like a shield. It don't look like a real banner. And so when I see stuff like that happen, it produces trigger points in my mind as a fan. When I look back at what I've witnessed and what I've enjoyed and all the great memories of watching the Los Angeles Lakers, it's not close to what make the Lakers great. It's not even close. Think about this. Do people realize how many players have been brought to this franchise since all this started 5 years ago? I would ask any Laker fan or basketball fan in general, because I'm not going to give the number. I'm not going to give the number because it would shock you. You'd be like, no way. There's no way in the world that they brought in these many players over the past 5 years. It's impossible. So I would ask you to research. And I'm talking about like do serious research. And when you see all the acquisitions, trades, free agent signings, players that they let go, just the whole 9 yards, you will conclude immediately that this franchise potentially, if they continue down this path, could eventually stumble into the point of no return or ultimately self-destruction as a franchise. And you wouldn't think that's possible because you see a team exist year after year after year, decade after decade after decade. You wouldn't think it's possible. But if you study history, there's been a lot of great empires that have fallen and crumbled when the thought of that would be unimaginable until it happened. Right? Think of the Roman Empire. I believe the Roman Empire lasted for like over 500, 600 years, somewhere around there. They thought it was going to stand forever until it crumbled. Now, I'm not trying to equate like a sports situation to an actual, historical event, but there's a lot of similarities, right? And a lot of times when something that has turned out to be so good becomes to be so bad, a lot of times what started out as being really good, it winds up being really bad because you lose sight of what made you great. So what I'm getting at is, because of this scenario that the Lakers have been led to embrace of this win now mentality. And when I say win now, I'm not talking about just win now. I'm talking about win right now. Right? And if you look at all the moves this franchise has made to capitulate to one guy, and I'm pretty sure whoever is listening to this or watching this knows who I'm talking about. I don't even need to mention his name. And you're not really getting the results because these are facts that I'm presenting. Outside of that season that turned out to be the bubble, ever since that player has been associated with this franchise, outside of that one season, which was a byproduct of mortgaging your franchise off for the next 10 years, this is why you have to constantly overhaul the roster. They have a cumulative losing percentage 4 out of those 5 seasons. Cumulatively, they have a losing percentage in a situation where you're supposed to be winning right now. Right? And in the midst of that, you see all these other teams that have come out of nowhere that were thought to be doormats for years, and now they're fixtures in the playoff picture. Teams like Sacramento, who hadn't been in the playoffs for 20 years, and suddenly, oh man, Sacramento, man, they ballers. Because remember, they had the #1 ranked offense last season. #1 ranked offense, the Sacramento Kings, right? The Minnesota Timberwolves, they're having the best start in the history of their franchise this season. In first place in the West. I believe they're like 21-5 as we speak. Oklahoma City Thunder, once they decided to start all over again and they traded away their top players, Russell Westbrook, Paul George, Chris Paul, you know what I'm saying? The 1 year Carmelo Anthony was on the team, they said we finna start all over again. And they acquired over 30 first round picks. And the experts was like, what are they doing? They was cracking jokes about them. They're not cracking jokes about them right now. And they're not going to be cracking jokes about them for the foreseeable future. Because their front office, their GM, is operating like a genius, like Houdini. And as of right now, #2 seed in the Western Conference. I can go on and on and on and give more examples. New Orleans Pelicans, they have a bright future for themselves. Last year, they were in first place in the West around the same time of the season, and they were ravaged with injuries from that point on. Okay. What I'm getting at is, if you're in win now mode and you have a cumulative losing record outside of that one season that turned out to be the bubble, that means something is being misrepresented. And that's the history of this franchise. And see, when they say they'll try to justify it, people who support the situation will try to justify it and say, well, the Lakers have always been win now. It's always been championship or bust. But the history don't suggest that. And I'm finna break that down. When the Lakers moved to Los Angeles, I'm not referring to. See, first of all, we all know, Laker fans all know that the franchise did not originate in Los Angeles. It originated in Minneapolis, led by George Mikan, right? And he helped spearhead 5 championships for the Lakers while they were playing in the state of Minnesota before they relocated to Los Angeles. I believe that was 1959, 1960, right? Okay. Now let's think about this. Let's think about this. Okay. In LA, it took them 12 years before they won their first title. Right? With Wilt Chamberlain. Once they got Wilt Chamberlain, they finally won their first championship, and that was in 1972. Arguably is the greatest single season that the Lakers have ever had in terms of win total, 69 wins, and then they achieved a mark that has been unprecedented and not even close to being matched in professional sports, where they won 33 straight games. Right? Okay. Now check this out. That was in 1972. And then they played in the finals the previous year, and they lost to the New York Knicks, if I'm not mistaken, in their finals, and they failed to repeat. Now check this out. They're going to tell us that the Lakers have been championship or bust every year. But after that finals appearance in 1973, they did not play for the championship for the rest of that decade, even after they acquired Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I believe in 1975, 1976 season. So they went 8 years from 1972 until they won their next championship. They won. This is not a negative or a positive. It's just the historical fact. Okay. So Kareem was playing for the Lakers for 4 years, 4 or 5 seasons, and then once they drafted Magic Johnson in 1979-1980 season, that's when they won their next championship in LA. Thus, the birth of what would eventually become known as Showtime Lakers, which really kicked off in 1982 when they won their second championship of that decade, of the 80s. And then they would go on to win 5 championships in that decade, which gave them the right to be called the team of the 80s. Of the NBA was Los Angeles Lakers. Okay. Now, mind you, now to justify what's going on now in this ultimate win now scenario where the franchise is being mortgaged off every year, and they're not even close to producing the results because they can't even win 50 games. You got 2 superstars. A couple years ago, you had 3 superstars. You had 5 Hall of Famers on the team at the same time, and they couldn't even win 40 games, and then he made the play-in. It's because the history of the franchise is being distorted and misrepresented, and that's why they keep on getting these results. Okay. So Showtime officially ended. The remnants of Showtime started to reach its run when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar retired in 1989, right? And then 2 years later, the Lakers advanced to the finals and upset the Portland Trail Blazers in the Western Conference Finals, and they faced the Chicago Bulls, which the Lakers lost 2 in 5 games. Okay. Now check this out. Magic retired in 91. Showtime, I'm talking about all the players that represented the Showtime era officially ended that run in 1993 when James Worthy retired. Michael Cooper had already retired. Then Byron Scott went to go play for the Indiana Pacers, and then A.C. Green, I believe he went on to play for the Phoenix Suns. So Showtime had ended officially in 93. The franchise had to start over again, right? Okay, now check this out. The Lakers, in the 90s, they rebuilt by drafting new players. Eddie Jones, Nick Van Exel, George Lynch, Anthony Peeler, right? So you still had your young veteran players like Vlade Divac and Elton Campbell's, right? Okay, so within a couple of years, 2 or 3 seasons, the Lakers would become a playoff level team again. Around 1995, 1996. Okay. Then they would go on to sign Shaquille O'Neal for an 8-year contract. And then Jerry West pulled off a Houdini move and had the vision that the experts didn't have. By acquiring the rights to draft Kobe Bryant at 18 years old. Now, mind you, he got criticized for that because they was like, what are you doing trading a veteran center like Vlade Divac for an 18-year-old kid? But he wasn't thinking about the immediate result. He was thinking about what Kobe Bryant could turn into 4 years down the road. And he was spot on because by year 4, Kobe Bryant became the superstar Kobe Bryant, and then the Lakers were going to produce their next championship run. Now, the Lakers had tremendous teams in the 90s, but they didn't win a championship in the 90s. Now, mind you, up until that point, the last championship that the Lakers won was in 1988 when they became the first team to repeat as NBA champions in 19 years when the Boston Celtics repeated as champions for the last time in 1969 during the Bill Russell era, right? Okay. So the Lakers went 12 years, and people complain about the Lakers not winning a championship since 2010. The Lakers went 12 years because they say it's title or bust. A title is a must, but that wasn't how the conversation was during the 90s because Showtime had ended. So, that's almost once in a lifetime to produce a team like that. We'll say once in a generation. Okay. So the fact that they was able to produce a quality competitive team like that in the 90s, that was a heck of an achievement. But instead of saying, well, the Lakers always been title or bust, well, the way I looked at it was, well, we didn't win a title in the 90s, but I love those guys just the same because they were Lakers. I still respect what Eddie Jones did for the team and Nick Van Exel did for the team. You know what I'm saying? I forgot to mention they drafted Derek Fisher too. The same year they brought in Kobe. Okay. So what they built as a foundation in the 90s set the stage for their championship run of the early 2000s. So this notion that the Lakers always operated championship or bust mentality, that's a myth, it's a misnomer, and it plays on the actual history of the franchise. Because quite to the contrary, to me, when I look back at it, the Lakers didn't operate as a win-now franchise. They invested in their future, and that's why ultimately they won the way they did. And it gets me to another point. When they mortgaged away and traded away their young core, the Brandon Ingrams, the Julius Randles, mind you, since they've been playing for their current teams, both players have been directly responsible for leading their teams to the playoffs. So this notion that you can't build a championship team around that young core, that's a myth too. That's a misnomer to justify the activity that's been going on over the past 5 years. Okay, now check this out. It gets me to another thing. These experts and people that support the situation, they're going to tell you and suggest that the Lakers never built through the draft. They're going to tell you that too. And that's an insult to what made the Lakers great. Because if you peel back the layers and study the history, check this out. See, this is where you have to really do research. Now, it's true that the staple position of the franchise has been the center position, which behooves me that they cannot establish this center position since they traded one of their own draftees, Ivica Zubac. They can't establish the position. They keep rotating centers and out of there like it's a carnival. You know what I mean? Like it's a Ferris wheel. But anyway, now I'm gonna round this out, and I'm gonna be talking about this some more. The staple position of the franchise has been the center, starting with George Mikan. Yes, they did trade for Wilt Chamberlain, but Wilt Chamberlain was like the final piece after years of Jerry West and Elgin Baylor leading that team throughout the 60s to finals appearances, okay? When they got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, it was like a reboot of the franchise after Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, and Wilt Chamberlain all had retired. It was a reboot. It wasn't like they cleared out the whole lot to bring in Kareem. You know what I'm saying? They didn't mortgage their future off when they brought Kareem in. That's what I'm trying to say. Kareem had only been in the league about what 5 years at that point? 5, 6 years? Okay. Shaquille O'Neal was signed as a free agent, but the team was already playoff level. So they didn't mortgage their future when they brought in Shaq. Andrew Bynum was drafted. He was the youngest player and the last player drafted right out of high school. Youngest player ever drafted to the NBA. Younger than Kobe Bryant, younger than LeBron James by a couple of months. And then when they traded for Paul Gasol, who's really a power forward, the Lakers, their record that year, and they only traded for Paul Gasol after Andrew Bynum suffered that first major knee injury of his career at that time. The Lakers was 30-11, meaning if they didn't even acquire Paul Gasol, the Lakers was going to the playoffs. They was first place in the Pacific Division when they traded for Paul Gasol. But once again, they didn't mortgage their future when they got Paul Gasol. He was a final piece. But if you peel back the layers, Jerry West was drafted. Elgin Baylor was drafted. Gail Goodrich was drafted. Michael Cooper was drafted. Norm Nixon, the early, point guard of the Lakers during the beginning of the 80s, when they won their first two championships in the 80s, Norm Nixon drafted. Michael Cooper drafted. Kurt Rambis was drafted. James Worthy was drafted. A.C. Green was drafted. Byron Scott, the same way they acquired the rights to draft Kobe Bryant, they did the same when they drafted Byron Scott, A.C. Green. And they were drafted low in the first round. So scouting those players, the right players to complement what they already had, that's what kept Showtime running and at the top. Kobe Bryant. Derek Fisher was drafted, right? Elder Campbell was drafted. He was a good player. Vlade Divac was our starting center when we went to the finals in 91. Drafted. I can go on and on and on. David Rivers, the number one point guard in the country, coming out of Notre Dame in 89, drafted. Andrew Bynum, drafted. Sasha Vujacic, drafted. Jordan Farmore, drafted. Devin George, drafted. So this notion that the Lakers always relied on outside players to win, it's a misnomer. It's a misrepresentation of their franchise. And that's why they have lost their way, because outsiders are trying to redefine the history of this franchise, what made it great, which has culminated in a moment where they unveiled a crown in the rafters that don't belong and has devalued those real championships that they won prior to this situation. Once they brought that guy to this franchise in the summer of 2018 and got rid of all his drafted players. And ironically, that's why the franchise is struggling to compete. That's why they had to rely on outside players to compete. But the more they go this route, the lesser talent that they're bringing to the roster every year, because other franchises are re-signing their drafted players and continuing to develop them. And now they're seeing the benefits of that approach. And that's why the Lakers, because of this dude on the team, has to make trade after trade after trade after trade after trade. It's a no-win situation. And it's all because you mortgage that young core off, which is with the most vital representation of what you needed to reestablish yourself and continue that tradition and move forward and succeed, truly succeed in this decade. And because that they're gone, their void is larger than ever. And that's why so many teams are ahead of the Lakers right now when it didn't have to be. Because their history has been distorted. So I just want to drop that nugget real quick, man. This is deep. Like I said, I'm going to break this down stage by stage. And I just want fans to consider, is all this worth it? Is all this worth it? But until next time, this is JB for BTB, Behind the Bench.